Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Antony.
And this is Words and Numbers. What's new and exciting in your world this week?
Today's story comes from Ottawa. There's something weird going on there that has to do with the whole remote work thing. And that is tens of thousands of Public Servants Alliance of Canada workers are going on strike. The problem is it's unclear where they should go on strike because so many of them are remote workers. What do? Pick it outside your own house? I don't know.
That's right. Go out and sit in my driveway with a big angry sign.
Yeah. And so this is one of the weird twists of remote work. In a related story, a friend of ours, David Gillette, who's a professor at Truman State University, reports that Truman State's tech side has come to a crashing halt because somebody introduced ransomware into their system. Of course, the professors, even if you're in person, the materials you're using are online, you're projecting them, you're downloading them, whatever it is, all of that has come to a screeching halt. And why you would hold the university hostage for ransom is beyond my comprehension.
My guess is that Truman State's never going to pay that.
Even if they could, right?
I'm going to go you one step further here. I know you've been smitten with the idea of AI and ChatGPT and what might come of it. Some enterprising German editor, I guess we have to call him, decided to use one of these tools to create an interview with F1 legend Michael Schumacher. Michael Schumacher, the driver who has not appeared in public for years after suffering a rather severe brain injury. This editor had AI make up an interview with Schumacher, and they published it.
So he says, look, answer questions as if you were this guy.
That's right. And Michael Schumacher's family is none too pleased with the outcome. They're lining up to sue, and the editor has already been fired. But here you see the idiotic side of this sort of AI, right? And you see it with students right now who think they can get all their work done by an online bot.
Right.
Come to find out, no, there aren't rules for this yet, not really, but there sure are going to be before long. You know, there was like this little tiny subheading, what he might have said, this kind of nonsense. Disclaimer, I think the intent to deceive was pretty clear here. It occurred to me as I read this that this is exactly the same as what I'm hearing from all of my professor friends who are grading AI-written papers at this point. Which brings us to the foolishness of the week. This comes from an opinion piece over at CNN, and I've purposely not informed you about any of this. I want to read you the first paragraph, and I want to see how quickly you can dissect the math.
Okay.
Because I have to tell you, I'm not exactly math proficient, and I was on this in like 2 seconds. This was sent to me by philosophy professor Chris Supernaut. Also not a math major, and he tore into it exactly as quickly as I did. And the sad thing is, this is written by a guy named Scott Hodge, who is president emeritus and senior policy advisor at the Tax Foundation, a group whose work we use quite a bit. See what you can come up with here, Ant. 56% of Americans say the amount they pay in taxes is more than their fair share, up from 51% who thought so in 2019. Unsurprisingly, nearly 2 of every 3 Americans feel the wealthy don't pay their fair share of taxes. Yep, you're making the face that I made. You're already into the marrow of the problem, but let me continue for just a moment. And 61% said they would support raising the taxes on households earning over $400,000. All right, 3, 2, 1, go.
Yeah, what about the 2/3 thing? What is this?
If 56% of Americans say they're paying too much, but 2/3 think that the wealthy aren't paying their fair share, we've got a bunch of wealthy people who don't know they're wealthy. That is the only conclusion you can come to from those numbers. What in heaven's name is wrong with these people?
Well, see, the thing is, it's always the other guy. When I think about the rich should pay their fair share, I'm always thinking of the other guy. He should pay more.
No matter how wealthy I am, I'm really only thinking about people who make twice as much.
And that's how you get runaway government.
That's right. It's right there in the numbers. 56% of Americans know that they're paying too much. Now, I can already tell you that that's not right, because 56% of Americans aren't paying federal taxes.
The number is roughly 75% of federal income taxes paid by the top 10%. The top 10% are paying 75% of the income tax.
So if 56% of Americans think they're paying too much, we got a bunch of people in that group who are literally paying nothing or less than nothing, and they think they're paying too much.
Right.
And this is straight out of a Pew Research poll. Hodge used Pew, as we often do.
In people's defense, part of the problem here is the convoluted way we do taxes. It comes out of your paycheck, and then when you go and file your taxes, you get money back, and it's unclear to pretty much everybody how much you actually paid, if indeed you paid at all. You may have actually received back more than you paid in.
And I meet these every year who say, I pay taxes, they take it out of my paycheck.
Right.
No, that's not indicative of you paying taxes.
How much are they giving you back?
How much did you get back, and what transfer payments did you receive?
Yep.
And once you look at that, we got a big group of people who pay nothing or less than nothing. And given these numbers in this article, they think they're paying too much.
We should take a moment to encourage our listeners to apply to the week-long seminar.
Hold the phone, because we're going to get 100,000 applications now. This is limited to graduating high school seniors who are going to college and returning college students.
And this is at the Stevenson Center at Wabash University. The week-long seminar, well, I say week-long, it's 5 days. It's all expenses paid, the room, the board is handled, even your travel to and from is handled. This is at no cost to you. James will be there, I'll be there, and 3 other faculty who have appeared on Words and Numbers.
That's great, right? The rest of the faculty there, Words and Numbers guests.
That's right.
Howie Beecher, Rob McDonald, and Clark Neely. We should bring microphones to this event and interview everybody all the time.
Actually, we will do that, yes.
But if you've got a young person in your life, or if you are a young person going to or returning to college, you should absolutely come. It doesn't cost you a thing. You get to hang out with all of us. It will be, I guarantee you, a fantastic time.
To apply, there'll be a link in the show notes. Click on that and do it soon. The deadline is what, James, May 5?
May 5. And you will hear back by May 10. So the sooner you get your application in, the sooner you will hear back in a positive manner. You don't want to be competing for the last bunch of slots. Do apply. We would love to meet you. And if you have children or nieces and nephews and the whatnot, get them wise to this and send them off to meet us. And we will talk to them for 5 solid days.
For one-stop shopping for all things James and Ant, visit our website, wordsandnumbers.org.
When we talk about income, it's in response to this thing that you hear all the time, that income has been stagnant since 1977 and people don't make nearly as much as they once did. And looking around, you know that's not true. We live in better houses, we drive better cars, we live better lives, we're healthier. Every marker that you can think of since 1977 has improved. And it turns out that income might be a lot more complicated than even we thought at first.
It is, and what got me thinking about this is a discussion I had with someone, if you want to call it a discussion, on Twitter recently.
Did somebody call you a bunch of bad names after you presented, facts?
Well, he didn't call me bad names, but there was lots of vitriol, as you can imagine.
People get so angry on the Twitter. I don't really get it. If you're going to be angry every time you go there, why do you go there?
It puzzles me. It's not just that they want to be angry. They want to say things that they have no knowledge about. And they're going to say these things vociferously, which I don't get. Why would you pick some area of expertise that you know nothing about and start spouting forth and saying, no, this is the way it is?
It would be like me going to a neurologist and saying, no, that's not how you perform brain surgery. But I'm willing to say maybe I don't know enough about income.
Well, it turns out that the question, what is America's income? It's not an easy question. You would think it would be, right? Just add up. What's the average person's income?
It seems straightforward. I do it every year around about April 17th
right.
or 18th.
But when you start digging down into it, you realize, well, wait a minute. There's not just wages and salaries, which is what people normally think of. There's also employer-paid benefits, your paid time off, and the contributions to your health insurance and all this sort of thing. And then there's income that people get from interest, from capital gains, from rent. These sorts of things are also income, but you don't typically think of them as income.
Well, those are rich people income, Ant.
Yes, the big chunks are. Well, now let me back off on that a minute, because...
Except for middle-class retirement accounts.
That's where I was going to go.
But that's not income until you take it out. And you see, all of a sudden it is getting a little complicated, isn't it?
And then it gets even more complicated again when you start to say, okay, do you mean income of a person or of a household or of a family?
When I, in my ignorant political scientist way, thought about income prior to throwing my lot in with you, I never thought about household income, and yet when we look at government data, household income is actually front and center.
Yeah, it tends to be quoted more often than the other measures.
Okay, now it's complicated again because my children start to earn an income and my household income expands, and then they do what children do and they leave. That doesn't really mean that my income has taken a hit at all, because it wasn't like I was keeping the money. The house is a gigantic fixed cost. When you add one more person in the form of a child, the food budget goes up and all, but that's really about it. There's not a giant enhanced cost per child.
Yeah, and I think that's the key answer. There is no correct metric because this thing that's so easy to say, income, actually is so complicated that one metric isn't going to satisfy. You got to look at it from all different perspectives. And even if we could agree on some definition and say, all right, this is the definition of income, you then have the problem of, do you want to talk about the median? Do you want to talk about the average? Those are two very different numbers. Each one communicates something different. And you see, now you're back to the same problem again. What is income?
Economists. It's always the same with you people. You never give us a straight answer for anything.
I want to take this in a rough order from simplest to most complicated. Talk about people's income, and we'll talk about the numbers here. And perhaps the simplest measure is what we call personal income. Personal income is income earned, by a person from all sources. So it's wages, it's salaries, it's interest, it's capital gains, all these things. Personal income. Now, this excludes, of course, children because children aren't working. But, and this is the first wrinkle to come along, it includes retirees. And this now becomes a bit of a problem because when you're a retiree, you've built up wealth, but you no longer have a job. So in one sense, your income is low. On the other sense, by this time, your house is probably paid for, your car is paid for, so your expenses are low as well. So you can see right off, including retirees, causes a little bit of a problem. But let's just talk about personal income. Income earned by people from all sources.
All sources. That's your job. That's any contract work you do. That's any interest you make. That's any capital gains you take.
It's your Social Security benefits.
It's a longer list than people might think.
It also includes transfers, money that the government gives to people, typically to poor people, in the form of housing subsidies or SNAP benefits or whatever it is.
It's the earned income tax credit that's the chief offender here, isn't it?
Is also a big one, yeah. Any form of cash or cash equivalents that the government gives to people, that also counts as personal income. If you look at the median, so the guy in the middle, there was 38,000 as of the last data that came in, that's 2021. It's going to be roughly the same now. 38,000 personal income. And that doesn't sound very impressive, does it?
But it makes sense, right? Because we always say that the median household income is about 70 grand.
Which would be roughly 2 wage earners, yeah. So the median's 38.
What's the average?
This is the metric problem of what number do you want. The median is 38,000. The mean, or what people typically refer to as the average, is 57,000.
It's a
big difference there, right?
Yeah.
The reason you get a difference here is because the mean can be pulled up by people at the high end that earn tremendous incomes. Give you a simple example. If you've got 3 people, one earns nothing, one earns 50,000, one earns 100,000. The average for those 3 is 50,000. And the median, the guy in the middle, is also 50,000. Now, we had 0, 50,000, and 100,000. That 100,000 guy, let's jack him up to 1 million. So now I've got 3 people, 0, 50,000, and 1 million. The median is still 50,000, the guy in the middle. But now the average is 350,000, right? That's that one guy with the million that's dragging the average up.
But there's an interesting thing going on here that I wouldn't have necessarily expected. We all know that there are people who are very wealthy who get tremendous salaries. But we also know that there are people who get close to zero.
Yes.
And yet the numbers are pulled way more by the people at the top than the people at the bottom.
Yes, that's beautiful. And what you have stumbled upon is one of the problems that economists have with inequality metrics, because income is bounded on the lower end. You can't go lower than zero, but it's not bounded on the upper end.
And actually, in the United States, it's almost impossible to hit zero.
Exactly. When you're getting transfers from the government, you're not going to hit zero.
It's endlessly interesting to me that the numbers are skewed by the rich, and people are going to get all worked up about it. But how is that not great news?
It is great news because one of the things you have to realize is as people's incomes rise across the board, as everybody's incomes rise, you necessarily are going to get an increase in inequality, because there are going to be people at the end who are now rising, faster than everybody else. All of your numbers are going up. Or think of it the other way. If you pushed everybody down, you'd get less and less inequality because of that lower bound of zero. You're pushing people down, but people can't go below zero, so necessarily you're squeezing them all together. One other thing I want to point to here with personal income, the real median personal income, real means adjusted for inflation. Look at the guy in the middle. His income is up 45%. That's real. So it's 45% more than inflation since the 1970s, and actually up 10% more than inflation over the past 2 decades. We've got wages, salary, interest income, capital gains, rental income. All of those things are incomes that are coming from market activities, but then you've also got Social Security benefits. You've got any kind of transfer from the government, welfare payments, SNAP payments, things like this. All of that is the personal income.
But you've missed a big chunk of it because you also get employer-funded benefits. Your health care from your employer, your retirement account from your employer, anything your employer contributes that's not salary but that you would have had to pay money for. If we're going to talk about income, fine. If we're going to talk about compensation, fine. But understand that this is yet another complicating factor.
So this is personal income. Now let me give you another measure. Median usual weekly earnings. It's a horrible name, but that's what they call it. Median usual weekly earnings. And what this is wages and salaries only. So it's no interest, no capital gains. It's no transfers from the government. It's straight up wages and salaries. So this is the kind of thing that we think of when we think of income. It's my paycheck. What's interesting about this number, and I'll tell you the dollar amount in a moment, what's interesting about this number is, of course, it excludes children because children don't have jobs. It also excludes retirees because the retirees don't have jobs. It also excludes part-time and unemployed workers. So this is what you think of when you think of a worker. Take the guy in the middle who has a full-time job, he's working. What does he earn?
Let me ask the obvious question before we continue. What percentage of the American public falls into that category?
That's a good question. I can tell you that as of roughly now, in the United States, there are 160 million people who are employed. Now, that is everyone who's employed. It's the full-time and the part-time. So the full-time is going to be some fraction of that. I don't know what fraction we're talking about, but my guess is that the answer to your question is something north of 100 million people. So here's the number. The median usual weekly earnings, and you multiply by 52 so you get the year. On an annual basis, the guy in the middle, the guy who has the full-time job, is earning $56,000. Now, compare that to that median personal income number I gave you earlier of $38,000. There's a huge gulf there.
Right.
What's driving that gulf? The $38,000, the personal income number, that includes retirees. Again, people who have built up wealth, but now they don't have income because they're retired. If you look at the guy who's actually working full-time, that's $56,000. And that's kind of what we think of when we think of income. You picture in your mind somebody who has a regular job, who's working, he's not retired, you're not talking about children. So that number, the guy in the middle, $56,000. as of today. That's not too bad.
And I'm guessing there are a number of people listening right now who are nodding their heads because the common shorthand that we use, and we have used for a while, is that if you're making about $1,000 a week, you're doing okay.
Yeah, that's about right. And remember, that's just wages and salaries, not interest. It's not employer-paid benefits. It's just your paycheck. Now, let me give you another category. And this is one the census likes to look at. This is called family income. It's different than the household income you mentioned a moment ago. A family is a household occupied by two or more people who are related by birth, marriage, or adoption, something like this. So it's actually a subset of household. You can have people who are not related living in the same household, and their incomes come together. For example, when I was a graduate student, there were 3 of us living in a 3-bedroom apartment. Well, that apartment unit is a household. And so the 3 of us together, our incomes would be a household income, but not a family income because we weren't related.
And wouldn't cohabitation trigger the same sort of thing?
Yeah, I don't know. And here we have to go back to the footnotes because the technical definition is 2 or more people related by birth, marriage, or adoption. I don't know if there's something else about cohabitation.
And you can see how these numbers will fluctuate over time, given how we've come to treat gay marriage.
Right, yes.
At one point, there was no such thing, and now all of a sudden there is, right? So a definition is being satisfied now that wasn't just 10 years or so ago.
There's that, and forget about the gay marriage. What do you do about a couple, man, woman, cohabitating, and they just decide, well, we don't need a piece of paper, as you hear people saying now? How do you treat that? Because legally they aren't married.
In fairness, people have been saying that since the 1960s, so that's not really a new thing. I know you don't get out much, but that's not so new.
Here, the numbers take a striking turn. The median weekly earnings I mentioned before on an annualized basis, that's $56,000. Family income, the median, this is the guy in the middle, $89,000. That starts to sound pretty good.
That's pretty sweet, isn't it?
Now, people will point to things here and say often when I quote a number like this, the $89,000 for the median family income, and they'll say, well, yeah, but all the households are 2-income households now versus in the past when there was only one wage earner. I actually have some numbers on this. In 1960, 25% of U.S. households were dual income, only 25%. Today, it's about 60%, and it has been about 60% since 1990. So at least from 1990 to the present, there hasn't been a marked change in the number of incomes in a household. And yet, those families' incomes are up probably 20% or so since 1990. This is actual gain, and that's 20% more than inflation. They have at least 20% more purchasing power.
People should know this intuitively.
They should and they don't.
All you have to do is ask a previous generation to compare the way they lived at the same point in their lives with the way we live at this point in ours. And the answers are always clear. Not sometimes, and always.
And I think, James, part of the reason that people believe that they aren't any better off is because they're very quick to define down necessity. People say, well, I can't be better off because I'm financially constrained. And you say, well, why are you financially constrained? Well, I've got to pay for Netflix and Hulu and my cell phone thing and my Comcast internet access, and we've got 2 cars and all of this stuff. Oh, yeah, sure, you're financially constrained. People were financially constrained in 1990 also, but they didn't have all of that stuff that you have now. We get some more income, we buy some more stuff, and very quickly that stuff we're buying we categorize as necessity. And so you think, well, I don't have any money for luxuries. Well, that's because you just defined down all of the luxuries that you have.
And in the end, we live very luxurious lives.
Yes.
What we would consider poor people live pretty luxurious lives too.
Yeah.
How do I know this? The average poor person in the United States has a big screen TV, a cell phone, air conditioning. That's actually kind of amazing.
None of which I had growing up in a middle to upper middle income household 50 years ago.
Of course you didn't. And my father and I were talking about this a couple of weeks ago when I was opining that what I really needed was an 85-inch TV, and all the men are thinking, that's right, James, that's exactly what you need. How on earth will you watch football next year on the paltry 73-inch TV that you now have? Because I was looking this up, and you can get an 85-inch TV right now for about $1,200, and that's the standard out the door price, not the sale price. You can get one cheaper if you're willing to wait and shop around. And my father and I were remembering when he bought our first 30-inch cathode ray tube TV. It was so big that the neighbors came over to look at it. And it was 1981 when he got it, and you can go to the inflation calculators and take a look in constant dollars. And that's almost a $3,000 TV today.
Yep.
How on earth did we have enough money to buy a TV that cost $3,000? All of a sudden, he had a better job is the correct answer, right? You got a couple of raises at work, and before you know it, you can afford luxuries. He went out and bought a TV with it instead of something else, like, good food or a fan for the bathroom, something the house still doesn't have. I would never spend $3,000 on a TV. Why? Because I don't have to. That's not the price anymore.
Right. What's the price for the 80-inch one you're looking at?
$1,300, 85-inch. But I bought the 73-inch I have like 2-3 years ago for $650.
That's amazing.
I spent $1,400 on my first computer back in 1990 or whatever it was. And I'm still spending that kind of money on computers, but this is not apples to apples comparison that we make.
Let me round out my list of definitions here. So we had personal income, that's income earned from all sources combined, and the median is $38,000. Then we had usual earnings, that's wages and salaries only, and that's full-time workers only, and the median there is $56,000. And then we have family income, the income to a family, the median there is $89,000. And now we've got household income. This, of course, includes families, but it also includes people living in the same household or housing unit who aren't related. And the median there is $71,000, less than the median income for families. And I'll give you one more now that we've talked about household income. So median household income is $71,000. Median household market income. So we've got two measures here, median household income and median household market income. Median household income is income from all sources, and that includes government transfers. Median household market income is income generated from market activities only. So their interest counts, capital gains counts, wages, but no government benefits, no Social Security, none of that business. That number is $64,000. So it's kind of interesting. The median household's earning $64,000 from the marketplace, and then an additional $7,000 in the form of transfers from the government.
If I have it right, and I'm painting with a very broad brush here, and I'm going to get to the details in a second, but painting with a very broad brush, we're doing well almost everywhere we look.
We really are. I mean, these numbers are good. And of course, there are people who earn a lot less. There's people who earn a lot more. The numbers not only are looking quite good, they're marching almost lockstep upward over time, adjusted for inflation.
I think that much is clear. But let's ask the harder question. Where aren't we doing well?
Yeah, that's a good question, James. Only one thing jumps out at me as I rattle off these median incomes, $56,000, $71,000, $64,000, $89,000. The one number that stands out is personal income. The median there is $38,000. That's markedly lower than those other numbers. Now, two things are responsible for that. One is that we've included retirees, who we've already said would have lower incomes. But the other is that this is income on an individual basis. So if you've got one person, let's say a single mother, she probably looks more like the $38,000 than she looks like the $89,000 family income.
We haven't accounted for any demographic differences whatsoever, except for retirees.
That is right. And we have data to do that.
And I'd really like to drill down into that. What role does race play? What role does gender play?
That would be an interesting thing to do.
Let's tee that one up, and these two episodes together can give a rather comprehensive overview of the idea of income in the United States. And that's all the time we've got this week on Words and Numbers. Until next time, be sure to follow us on Twitter. Handles are in the show notes. Join Words and Numbers Backstage, the Facebook group where the conversation continues, and
send us email, wordsandnumberspodcast@gmail.com.
Until next week, try to be nice to one person who doesn't deserve it. Just one. And who knows, it may turn into a trend. Give it a shot. You might feel good about yourself.
You could say you tried.
You tried, that's right. Till next week, can't take it easy.
See you next week, James.